Nietzsche's talk because it was very engaging, I thought, even though I'm on the same side. I'm here, though, as a representative of academic philosophy, so all of those of you who are students know what's coming. It's going to be a little bit dry for now. But I'm also here as the representative of the Friedrich Nietzsche Society. In fact, I believe that's why I was invited. So I will aim to convey what it is that Nietzsche meant when he said God is dead. Now, it is of course the case that, as the Honourable Opposition has already mentioned, that Nietzsche was not the first to say this, because Pascal, Hegel, and the German poet Heinrich Heine had already pronounced upon this. But I think it's true to say that Nietzsche's has been the most influential elaboration of this. So, who then is the God that Nietzsche says is dead? In one sense, it is, of course, the traditional God of Christianity in whom one may believe. But in another and more far-reaching sense, it is in fact the entire structure of reality. It is metaphysics in the broad sense of the term. And in that sense, God is a term for the way that supersensory ideals operate in order to produce a certain sense of reality for the human beings who live in it, in this reality. God is then merely a title for a certain ideal and a certain distribution of values that attend it. So this image of the world has, of course, been dominant ever since the time of Plato, who pronounced the supersensory world, the world of the ideas, a higher world, and in fact, even the only true or real world. And in contrast to that, this world, the world of mere appearances, was considered to be flawed, deficient, incomplete, and even unreal. Just think about that. The world that we live in is deficient, flawed, and unreal. And of course, we ourselves have come to think of ourselves in that way, as beings living in that world. Now, although this distribution of values between this world and the higher world is clearly life-denying, and hence, for Nietzsche, nihilistic, it was also the framework which gave meaning to life and provided a firm support for the spiritual and emotional lives of humans. Against this background, when Nietzsche proclaims the death of God, what he means ultimately is that the highest ideals which had organized our world for 2,500 years have begun to loosen their binding and organizing power. It is the end of security in God on which human beings had relied, and means that nothing is left to orient human being. As Nietzsche puts it in a very famous quote, it is as though this event, the death of God, has wiped away the entire horizon. Like the earth has been unchained from its sun, moving away from all fixed points, and as if it is plummeting into the black abyss, into an endless nothing, which makes everything feel colder. There is then a great pathos to this event, which we mustn't underestimate, the death of God, which, and this is important, is of course not a human doing, but a world historical event, with its own ineluctable necessity, as well as its own internal logic, namely what Nietzsche calls the self-overcoming, whereby all great things come to an end through such an act of self-overcoming. We, who inhabit the death of God, should think of ourselves as unmoored from any kind of certainty, as tumbling into an endless nothing, as he said. This is an indication of Nietzsche's understanding of nihilism, again, the absence of a comprehensive, binding force that designates to each their allocated place in the great hierarchy of being. Now, the term nihilism is clearly key here, and is deeply ambiguous, and more often than not misused. We have just seen what Nietzsche means by it, namely a historical development and not anyone's private beliefs or opinions. But nihilism has different meanings. I said earlier that the metaphysics or two-world theory that dominated the Western world and its tentacles for millennia is itself nihilistic, insofar as it deprives this world of all meaning and value and arrogates it to the other, higher world, and hence denies the value of finite life on earth. But the event of the death of God is also nihilistic in another sense, namely as the absence of all meaning from life, and specifically as the absence of transcendence. In fact, we might formulate the difference between the two kinds of nihilism as follows. In the era of metaphysics, there was too much transcendence, locked in the figure of the monotheistic God, and it was this surfeit of transcendence that was crushing life on this planet. Whereas with the event of the death of God, there is not enough transcendence. And this lack of transcendence also leaves us bereft of meaning. But, and this is the crucial point, this second kind of nihilism, the one we're experiencing now, does at least represent an opportunity, and Alex has already referred to that, an opening, namely to become creators of values ourselves, and hence to forge a transcendence rooted in the body, in this world, a transcendence rooted in the immanence we are, no longer dependent on a pre-given meaning and an existing transcendence or a given transcendence, but able to forge a new world of value, meaning, and beauty, and to affirm the life we are. But that endeavor too is fraught with danger, insofar as we might put up another God, and this is probably the most controversial part, which we have arguably already done by putting human being, or man, in the place of God, and so instigate a new metaphysics, this time around man. Arguably, this is what has been happening since the Renaissance, since the Enlightenment, and this has given rise to the ideal of a thoroughgoing humanism, such that human life is considered, soon. Such that human life is considered theoretically, ideally sacrosanct, even as many millions are in practice perpetually being sacrificed to the capitalist order which spans the entire planet nowadays, or to the many wars raging around the world. This as a reminder that what has thereby happened is that man, as an ideal, might have replaced God, but the essential theological structure of metaphysics has remained unaltered. God might be dead, but he's being resurrected continuously in the form of man. By contrast, if we genuinely want to affirm the death of God, and I assume some of us do, we must smash all idols, and not just the image of the one monotheistic transcendent God, the God of Christianity. Nietzsche calls it incomplete nihilism when one attempts to escape nihilism without transvaluating the former values. One is merely substituting new ones. Thus, what is needed is what is needed is a thorough transvaluation of all our former values. This should lead to a complete nihilism, which indicates a true liberation and affirmation of human beings' own perpetual self-overcoming, as well as a proliferation of the perspectives which guarantees that no one view or perspective can any longer dominate the entire world and society. As Nietzsche says, God is dead. God remains dead. But the only question for us is how we inhabit this event. Thank you very much.